should be a blessing. Got it. Okay, so when Rabbi Tursky just passed away, I think less than a year ago, he's a doctor, he's a psychiatrist. He ran addiction clinics, a number of addiction clinics in the U.S., and then he retired in Israel. And you'll see he speaks a lot. If you Google him, a lot of his stuff is about self-esteem. He really felt very strongly that self-esteem was an area that needed particular strengthening, because he really feels like everything stems from it. So let's just hear this little quote and we'll discuss.
Self-esteem for success and self-esteem for happiness. Self-esteem is probably the single most important factor in our lives. And the reason for that is this. When we see something, we assume that it is there. We don't feel that we are hallucinating. Now, if I have a vision, a perspective of something, so that is its reality. And if I have a perspective of myself and a concept of myself, well, that is my reality, and it's a very important part of my reality. And if my perception of myself is that I am in some way inferior, inadequate, incompetent, anything negative, if that's my perception of myself, then that's my reality, and I believe that anyone who looks at me is going to see what I believe is there. So if I think about myself as being inadequate, inferior, incompetent, I am certain that everyone who looks at me is going to see me that way. And I am going to relate to the world in that way. And I think you can see from there on the appropriateness of the title, Self-Esteem for Success. Right? Because if you have a negative opinion of yourself and you think that everybody sees you as negative, you're certainly going to have many barriers to a successful development.
Just any thoughts on that? Anything, did that was that something that you never thought about before, or you agree, disagree? Any comments?
So I actually, if I could chime in, I think I agree. And I actually have heard this before, where there's another lady who did a presentation about like power posing and like the way you present yourself and the way you view yourself as how you come across in a meeting. So I think there's a lot of truth in what he's saying.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about power posing is that it's an external lever that we have to pull. It is superficial. It's fake, right? And self-esteem has to be real, right? You can't fake self-esteem. But it's interesting that there are things like you're saying, power posing, that is a little bit fake it till you make it. You got to make sure you make it. You got to follow through and make sure you internalize it. But in the meantime, it's able to get you out of your shell. Let me just give you an example of that. In public speaking, almost everyone is afraid of public speaking. I think Jerry Seinfeld had a quote that was, the statistics are that public speaking is people's number one fear. The second is death. So his joke was, that means if people had to be at a funeral, they'd rather be in the coffin than be the one giving the eulogy. But then how do you get over that fear? So there's tips and tricks and things you can do and not do, and how you stand and how you pose and how you gesture and blah, 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 blah. That will not give you self-esteem, but the very fact that it helps you get the words out, that it helps you convey what you're saying in a more convincing way, at the end of the speech, you're like, hey, I did it. I gave a speech. I'm getting over my fear. And that's what builds self-esteem. So it's just to your point, that there are things you can do that can fake it, and that can allow you to actually get something done. And when you get something done, then it changes the way you look at yourself. Any other thoughts before we move on? Benjamin, I saw you unmute. I was very excited.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna actually sort of to what you're saying, and I think also sort of what the guy from the video was also saying. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it is just the mindset and how you do approach problems. That just affects everything. So even if it's still just as hard. I think it's just all about getting into that mindset. That's, all the battle there.
Good, and thank you for using that word mindset, because that's a good segue. You may be familiar because this has become very popular since she did this research. Professor Carol Dweck, I don't know if she's still there, but she was at Stanford. She developed this term that became very popular called growth mindset. Just anybody, show of hands, anybody heard this idea, Carol Dweck's growth mindsets stuff? Yeah. Okay, so since it's actually become, because it became a thing, there was a whole thing about fake growth mindsets that she spoke about more recently. Okay, but if you've never heard this, it's worth listening. Okay, so she's gonna share a little piece, and I'm gonna share. I don't have an excerpt from her sharing the piece I want to get to, so I'll say it myself in my own words. But here's the piece to start us off. Okay, Carol Dweck.
We also can change students' mindsets directly. In one study, we taught students that every time they pushed out of their comfort zone to learn something really, really hard, and they stuck to it, the neurons in their brain could form new, stronger connections, and over time, they could become smarter. Those who learned this lesson showed a sharp increase in their grades. Those who did not showed a decrease. We have done this with thousands of students now across the country with similar results, especially for struggling students. So let's talk about equality. In our country, there are groups of kids who chronically show poor performance, and many people think that's inevitable. But when educators create growth mindset environments steeped in yet, equality can happen. Let me just give you a few small examples. One teacher took her Harlem kindergarten class, many of whom could not hold a pencil for the first month, through daily tantrums. She took them to the 95th percentile on the National Achievement Test. That same teacher took a 4th grade class in the South Bronx, way behind. She took them to the top of New York State on the state math test. That teacher is a Stanford grad, and she's here today.
Any thoughts about what she said? Does everyone see the connection between what she's talking about, which I'll elaborate on now, and self-esteem? Anyone want to? So what's her point? What does it mean to have a growth mindset, as opposed to what she calls a fixed mindset? Anybody at all?
Hey, Rabbi, it's Ronnie here.
Hi.
I would say being growth mindset is being open to change, being open to going out of your comfort zone, versus if you're just fixed, then there's no growth.
Okay, good.
You're not growing as a human being, as an individual, and you're just stagnating where you are.
Okay, good. So one aspect of a growth mindset is that I'm open to change. I'm not a fixed quantity. I'm open to changing. That's one part of it. There's a deeper part of this over here. I'm going to say Rose over here. What did Rose say? Environment is what we heard that with the teachers and educators mentioned, right? The educators created an environment of that was a growth-centered environment. Let me just share a detail over here about Carol Dweck's work. Carol Dweck had three groups of students. One was the control. One was a group of students who they got praised for being really smart, right? After they took a test, they're like, wow, you guys are so smart, so smart, so smart. And another group of students got praised for their efforts. Okay, listen carefully. I think the results of the study are profound and relevant for all of us. the group of students that were praised for intelligence, when given a chance to take another test that was the same difficulty or more difficult than the previous test, generally chose the test that was the same level of difficulty. The group of students who were praised for effort, when given a choice between a test that was harder or a test that was the same, generally chose the test that was harder. Okay, but the plot thickens. The group of students that was praised for intelligence, when they took the test that was the same level of difficulty as the first test, did worse than they did the first time. The group of students that were praised for effort, as she showed, right? The growth-minded students, whatever, because they're praised for their effort. That's a growth thing. Effort is growth, right? I'm growing, I'm trying, I'm getting better, right? They performed better, right? Scaled. They performed even better than they did on the first test. Can someone explain this to me? How does this work? Why would a student who is praised for intelligence choose an easier or a test that's the same, not choose the challenge? And why would they perform worse?
Oh, you know,
One thing is maybe they felt that they had already achieved something. And given that their ego was praised, they didn't want to put themselves in a position where their ego could be damaged, or their achievements might not be valid anymore. Or maybe their confidence they started to doubt themselves.
That's great. By the way, nice to see you, Gene.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, okay, that's exactly that's the way I believe Professor Dweck explains it, is that if you're praised for intelligence, so then you are smart. That's who you are. Your identity is that you are smart. That sounds great, except it's not, because now what your fear is that you don't want to be caught not being smart, right? So you have to maintain status quo. Otherwise, you're going to lose your identity because you are smart, right? So you're going to make sure you take the test that's the same or lower, right? Because otherwise you're going to be caught, and you're going to perform in that nervousness, right? You're not going to perform as well, as opposed to someone who's praised for their effort. Then great, I want to try harder. What can I do? I want to push myself even more. And in that openness to doing better, in that the fact that their self-worth is a function of their effort, they're going to be more open. They're going to be able to take certain risks, and they're going to perform even better. It's all about the effort. Over here we have it's really an interesting point that maybe we don't think about. Self-esteem. It has a person can be locked into a negative image. So really what the clip we saw. So Professor Dweck said you could have kids they've been called bad kids or dumb kids or lazy kids, and that changes their own identity. So if you're a bad kid, or you're a dumb kid, or you're a lazy kid, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which is, by the way, you should have to be very careful the way you speak about yourself. Even in Jewish law, there's laws about speaking negatively about other people. They actually apply to yourself, because if you tell yourself you're a bad son or daughter, or you're a bad Jew, or you're a bad this, or you're a bad that, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're actually changing your self-esteem. So you have to be careful about the way you speak about yourself, just like you should need to be careful the way you speak about other people. But according to what she's saying, you have to be careful about identifying yourself even with positive things too strongly, because then you could become fixed in the positive thing, right? Because if you say I'm smart, that's your definition. It has to be that there's a deeper sense of self, which is I'm a person who pursues challenges. In other words, it's a deeper sense of self-esteem. If you define yourself by your effort, then you define yourself by a certain static state. Are we following anyone? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I work at one of the big 4 consulting firms, and they're obsessed with growth mindset. I don't know if they are working with Carol Dweck, but they literally forced us all to take a mandatory class on it. And one thing they said that was really interesting is that, like, rather than comparing yourself to others or being jealous of them, try to compare yourself to past versions of yourself so that you can be like, oh, I'm so much better at this than I was a year ago, rather than being like, oh, my coworker is so much better at this than me. So I thought that was like really helpful and something that I've actually tried to implement more. And I guess it goes the same for positive traits. Like if you're just thinking, oh, I'm great, like there's no reason to like continue learning and growing.
That's beautiful. And to that point, I think this is these ideas are not very well developed in most Americans' minds. We're just not educated. It's not part of our education to understand, personality traits in a deep way. But one of the things that's very poorly understood by Americans, I find, is the notion of arrogance and humility. To your point, in other words, arrogance is, an American normally thinks that if a person says something positive about themselves, they're arrogant, which is, according to Jews, not necessarily the case. What's arrogant is the way you relate to that thing. So in other words, if I say, I am smart, there's nothing necessarily arrogant about that, right? If you pat yourself on the back and take credit for it, then that could be arrogance. But the example I think about is like, on the airplane, they're like, where someone is having a medical issue, is there a medical professional on the plane? Right. So if someone is a med student, right, and is like, oh, I don't know, I'm a medical student, maybe that's not what they need, I'm not really a doctor. So what would that be? Humility? What do you think? By the way, this is based on a true story. This actually happened about 6 months ago. This past summer, there were two, I think it was like University of Louisiana or something, two medical students, right? They were on a plane. They saved someone's life. They were the only medical professionals of any sort on the plane. They saved the person's life this past summer. It's not arrogant of them. It's not arrogant of them to say, yes, we know, we're medical students. We know something about medicine, right? In fact, if they were kind of like in their heads and not raising their hands, that'd probably be more arrogant, because it's more important for them to not feel arrogant than it is to help, right? But to knowing what you have to give and to act on it, right? That's self-esteem. I'm a medical student. I've learned a thing or two. I've worked pretty hard. Let me see if there's something I can do with it. And that mindset is exactly the mindset that actually got these medical students out of their seats, and they actually saved someone's life on that plane. The interesting point, again, to this further point over here, is that people have found that people who are more gifted suffer more from self-esteem issues than people who are less gifted. Can anyone explain that phenomenon? Andy?
Yes. How are you?
You got something to say, or you're just smiling, being friendly?
Oh, I didn't know if I was interrupting the lecture. I thought you said my name. Sorry about that.
No, I do. You were smiling, so I thought it wouldn't be a cold call. I thought it'd be a warm call if I called.
Oh, yeah. How are you doing, chat? Good.
Yeah. Any thoughts as to why a person who might be more gifted might suffer more deeply with self-esteem issues than someone who's less gifted?
Like you said, it could be about identity. They're probably second guessing themselves. Like, am I doing things right? Am I doing this the best way I can? Am I still maintaining my high level of performance in whatever it is?
That's right. That's right. Another way of saying it, and actually got this from one of Rabbi Twersky's books, which I thought was very insightful, was that a person who is, +1, in terms of gifts, if they're not using them, like they're at -1, whatever, like plus or -1, like it's not really, so much of a big deal. But a person who knows that they have a lot to offer, a person who, is +10, if they don't feel like they're using their gifts, they feel -10, right? So a person, and this is one of these issues of like, if a person is told their whole life, you're so gifted, you're so smart, you have so much potential, you have so much potential, you have so much potential, right? When the person is not making good on those gifts, the person feels not good about themselves, right? And again, it just goes to the same issue of this fixed mindset. I am plus 10. So if I am plus 10, but I'm not using my 10, so then what am I? What am I doing with myself?
I think that they're also, there's a bigger fear of failure in those situations because they've heard those things all their life. And if they do fail, they're like, oh man, I knew it. I suck. All that stuff was a lie. And I've been living an illusion.
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to share with you guys something that is related, but it really kind of paints the picture of the way Judaism looks at these issues. Okay, just really quick. Just the fixed minded growth mindset. This is just a diagram someone put together. That if you have a fixed mindset, you avoid challenges, you give up easily, you see effort as fruitless or worse, you ignore useful negative feedback, and you feel threatened by the success of others. If you have a growth mindset, it's the opposite. You embrace challenges because it's all about growing, and you know challenges help you grow. In the face of setbacks, you're not afraid, so you persist. You have nothing to lose. You see effort as a path to mastery. Criticism doesn't affect you because criticism is a way to grow, so you can grow from criticism. And you find lessons, inspiration, success of others. Like, I'm not threatened. It's just about me, myself. As I think it was Bar who told us that you're just competing against your personal best.
Hey, Jack.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like when you were reading those, like I feel like that's something like, I mean, for me personally, like sometimes both types of mindsets could apply to me. I feel like it all depends on how I'm feeling, but I feel like it's not something that like we're set in, because it really does seem like sometimes I feel very much more one side and more the other. So it seems like more just, really, I guess, yeah, a mindset, but not like being identified by it,
Okay, good. I'm happy you said that. We'll come to that. Yeah. That's actually one of the things I alluded to, that she had this issue. This lady, Carol Dweck, had this issue. She popularized this term growth mindset. And then people at Big Four consulting companies started growth mindset. So then she had this thing called a fake growth mindset. It was like, we at McKinsey, we all have growth mindsets, right? That's who we are at McKinsey. We have growth mindset. So that's actually a fixed mindset, but just they replaced being smart with now growth mindset. So all these things, it's a subtle thing, and it's confusing because you can fake it. And all of this is about, it needs to be real. You need to actually feel this way. So you have to be careful about faking it. But we'll come to this of why we have both aspects inside of ourselves. Anyways, where does this come from? It's interesting. Human societies have these kinds of like caste systems. So this is like the Indian caste system. You have the Brahmins, and you have these other people I can't pronounce, and the Vaishyas, and the whatever, right? Of course, in European society, you have the system of the king and the lords and the knights and the peasants, and in Egyptian society, which is where we come from, the pharaoh, the government officials, the soldiers, the scribes, the merchants, the artisans, the farmers, and of course, at the way bottom, that's where we were. You have the slaves. It's interesting that in Jewish history that we came from the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. God wanted us to start at the way, way, way bottom. But here's a kind of picture of the way Judaism looks at life and looks at free will and identity. A person is placed on the field somewhere. Okay, and every person is placed on the field at a different place, right? Depending on the environment that you grew up in, the society you grew up in. Wherever you are, you can make moral progress. You can grow as a person, If you grew up in a family where people express themselves with a lot of anger, so, that's where you were placed. You're placed, anger is an issue for you. It was an issue for your parents, your mom, your dad, both. And therefore, it's an issue for you. You have to learn how to express yourself and keep cool. You can move the ball down the field. You can move the line of scrimmage, and that's a big win for you. Or you can succumb to it. We'll get to that in a moment. Or you can succumb to it and have moral regress and get worse at it. Okay, and put your kids in a worse situation. Now, to move forward too much is like, it's a little bit, it's a kind of a Hail Mary. Like it's a bit, it's not so likely you're going to move the ball scrimmage, the line of scrimmage so far down the line. But you know what? Over here, this is really reasonable for you. Again, there's things that you're never going to do. You're never going to go all the way. You're not going to get sacked 40 yards, right? But you know what? You could be pushed back a few yards, right? So this is the battlefield, and you're caught in the middle. Let me just express it one more way, and then we can talk about it. Maybe next week. Maybe next week we'll get a little deeper into this. The world seems to be divided, no matter what society you're in. It's divided in two ways of looking at it. There's, let's call it the right. When on the right, there's only one right, right? And that's whoever you are, right? You're right. And everyone else is wrong, 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 wrong. Okay? On the left, everyone's right. Everyone's right. It's your truth and my truth and her truth and right? There's only one person or one group of people who's wrong. Who's wrong? On the left. If you ask someone on the left, who's wrong?
Right.
Right. Those people are wrong. Everyone else is right, except for those people, right? So they're both kind of, these are caricatures, obviously, right? But they both have this funny thing. Like on the right, there's only like, to be right, you have to like live on that like point of like what's right, and everyone else is wrong. On the left, everything's right, except for those who say that only one thing is right. Judaism is neither of these things, okay? Unless just using the principle we learned in the previous image. Something to think about. Let's take one aspect, one surface of life. Let's call don't murder. So you could be like, listen, I'm a nice Jewish boy or girl. Like I don't murder anyone, so I'm fine. And it's like, well, that's not the way Judaism looks at it, right? Because you could have a guy who was born into the mob. His dad was a mobster. His grandpa was a mobster, right? A long tradition of being a mobster, okay? And then you have another person who, they're not a mobster. I would never kill someone, right? I'm a good person. Oh, well, do you ever speak negatively about other people? Well, like, yeah, like everyone speaks negatively about other people. Character murder is like, that's what you do over lunch, right? You just talk about people, right? Well, guess what? This guy can stop murdering people. He still maims people, but he's like, he told his dad or his uncle, whoever, his boss in the mafia, he's like, I'm not, you want to whack someone, have someone else whack them. I'm not killing people anymore. I'm done with that. I can't do that. I can't live with myself. But he'll still injure people and steal whatever. But you know what? He moved the ball down the field. That is moral progress. And then you have this lady over here who is talking smack about people left and right. And you know what? She's going to make moral progress. And she stopped speaking smack about people. Each one of these people, they grew. They grew as a person. They can both feel good about themselves. Even though this person is still injuring people, because that's what you have to do in the mob every now and then. But you know what? They still feel good. They still feel good about themselves deeply, in a deep spiritual way, that they stopped killing people. And this person, she still is working on stuff, but she stopped speaking about people behind their back negatively. She feels great about herself. That is the deepest form of self-esteem comes from the growth that you've made. What do you think about this? Anybody? Liana? Louisa? Elise? Hillary? I'm not even gonna bother with the people whose videos aren't shared. Just kidding. I love you guys. Hey, Navrouz.
Hey, I was just thinking about, I think that I really like the metaphor of moving the ball down the field. I just had an issue specifically with the example of the mobster, because I think that where you start in terms of where you start on the field, it's not just a factor of your family, but it's also a factor of the society you live in. And the mobster lives in a society where even maiming people is unacceptable. And so I do think that that mobster could choose to put himself in a different context, make new friends, hang out with other people, not hang out with his mob friends, and that would he would be able to move the ball down the field a lot further. So I'm not sure that the starting point is necessarily what you're born into. I think you can also there might be a different context that you can put yourself in to help you move the ball down the line.
I think you're right. And even to bring it more, that a person could also make bad decisions. I met a guy one Saturday night in the city. I was walking back from shul, and some guy in a wheelchair says, good Shabbos to me. I have one of these faces that my family makes fun of me, that just like people just start talking to me, and I get into these conversations. So I say, good Shabbos or Shavua Tov, whatever. So it turns out he's a Jewish guy, and when he was 16, his dad passed away, and his mom couldn't make ends meet, and he became a courier for the mob. This guy starts like opening up to me and tells me, and he said he did horrible things. He really sees himself. He's telling me he sees himself as irredeemable and God doesn't love him. So, I tried my best, but this guy basically, he started at 16. He became a courier. By the time he was 18 or 19, he was a hitman. Okay, that he wasn't born into that. Those are decisions he made. You could say he's 16, whatever, you can make decisions. But at the end of the day, he is dealing with certain moral challenges that you and I don't know you, Navruz, but I imagine you and I are not dealing with, right? So everyone has their own situation. The point is that whatever your situation is right now, that's your situation. And the question is, what is the progress you're making from where you're at? The self-esteem is most deeply a function of the choices we make. But everyone's choices are different depending on their circumstances. Does that make sense, Navruz? I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying. Obviously, he lives in a society where killing is not good. But the point is, he's in a certain circle, a social circle, where that's much more okay than it is for you and me. So that means that the way he looks at himself has to be a function of that scenario that he's in.
Definitely, I think that makes sense. For me, it's just a question of how much progress is the right amount of progress. And for someone to go, I know it's just a hypothetical example, but for someone to go from killing people to maiming people, I think that there's a lot more progress that they could feasibly be doing.
Okay, so that's not. This is a class about self-esteem, not other esteem, which I think your point is a very interesting point, but it's more about to what degree can we judge other people. So according to what you're saying, we actually can judge other people somehow, which may be true. I think it's a very interesting question. To what degree are we capable of judging other people? But over here, we're talking about how we look at ourselves. So in every person knows what their struggle is. Every person has bad habits. Every person has things that they know they shouldn't be doing. And so what we're discussing here is that our self-esteem is a function of to what degree are we living up to our expectations of ourselves. Does that make sense? Anyone else want to share any thoughts on any of this?
Some progress is better than no progress, right? One step is better than 0 steps.
100%. 100%. That's why self-esteem you really can't fake it. People can make you feel good, and they can make you feel safe, make you feel loved, and we all need to do that. But at the end of the day, it's those steps that we make on any given day. We're making steps in the right direction. We're sometimes we slip, we take steps back. That's really where our self-esteem is made, and it adds up. If every day you're making one step in the right direction, like that's really deep. That really changes the way you look at yourself, and that changes the way you present yourself to others.
Yeah, I think it's better to try and not succeed, that whatever or something, than to not even try at all. And at least you could tell yourself, at least I tried, or took that step, instead of not moving at all.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what we're saying over here.
I think it's tough to internalize that for most people. It kind of seems almost counterintuitive. Like, why would I try if I either know I will fail or there's a high possibility of that kind of outcome? So
Benjamin said that he has both, right? Benjamin, you said, right, that we have both of these things inside of ourselves, right? Both of these outlooks.
I did, yes.
So the reason we have both these outlooks is because we're part body and we're part soul, which means part of us is a body. A major part of us, in case you haven't noticed, is your body, right? And your body is whatever it is, right? You're tall, you're short, you're this, you're that. There's certain things about your body you can change, but there's many things that are static. And being in a body, our tendency is to see things as they are. They're set, right? It is what it is. It's physical. But another part of us is much deeper. It's our soul. And our soul, the nature of our soul is that our soul is always about potential. It's always about what can be. So the reason we oscillate between these two is because we really have these two parts of our identity. We have our fixed body, but on the inside of we have our consciousness. In the depths of our consciousness, we know that we can transcend ourselves. We've done it in the past. We were once children and now we're adults. We once couldn't do things and now we can do things. When we're able to tap into that deeper consciousness, we're much more able to grow. When we identify ourselves like, I'm just my body, I am what I am, I'm this, I'm that, I'm lazy, I'm dumb, I'm this. So then we're stuck. But I think to Benjamin's point, we do have these two different ways of seeing, and they're very much both rooted in real parts of who we are. Rabbi Lewis, how are we doing? Should we stop?
We can go for a couple more minutes, yeah, if you'd like. But we're basically at the stopping point.
Okay, so next week I want to actually discuss something a little bit different, which is about individuality, and knowing who you are as an individual is very much connected to this topic. I just want to end with one more point that I didn't speak about yet, which is intrinsic self-worth, unconditional self-worth. Over here, we spoke about a kind of conditional self-worth, which is about, my effort. And even though my conditional self-worth is not about how much money I have or how smart I am or how good my genes are, all this stuff is really not so important, right? Because it's about what you do with those things, what you do with those assets. That's what we spoke about until now. But it's a bit conditional because it's a function of performance. But there's another aspect of self-esteem, which I didn't speak about. I don't want to leave you without, which is unconditional self-worth. Unconditional self-worth is really the foundation of the other one. Unconditional self-worth, if you were lucky enough to have someone in your life, whether it was your parents, your grandparents, a teacher, a coach, someone who loved you unconditionally, so you have a great gift, because that's what allows you. I think Gene spoke about taking risks. You're much more likely to be able to take those risks and to exert that effort and to try to push the ball down the field if you know that deep down, you're valuable because you're valuable. That's the basis. That's the kind of the self-esteem that's unconditional, and that really is in your core. And if you don't have that fortune, so then you have to, it's harder. You have to build that sense, and really that's ultimately comes from a sense of God, and that you were put in this world, and that you're valuable intrinsically, and that intrinsic worth comes from some source of being that transcends everything, and that put you here and wants you to be here. But anyways, I just want to add that piece for you guys to think about between this week and next week, that basically our self-esteem really has these kind of two components: this intrinsic self-worth, unconditional self-worth, and where that comes from and how we strengthen that. And this other one that we spend most of the time speaking about, this conditional self-worth, but is conditional not on dumb conditions like money or DNA or whatever, but really the conditions is, am I doing the work? Am I putting in effort? Am I living up to my own personal potential? Thank you guys for giving me your attention and your thought. Thank you guys for who participated, for sharing screen, for sharing your video. Props to all of you guys whose face I didn't see. Hopefully I get to see you next week. But thank you, Rabbi Lewis, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Rabbi Jack. If I could trouble you, if you wouldn't mind typing in your email or your number or whatever, if anyone has questions, I think people might appreciate it if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely, tweeting right now.
And while you're at it, if you want to share your book,
Sure.
title and everything.
I'll share it for the,
Great.
we're brave enough to read it. It's not like an academic book, it's just, but it's not like a light read. It's a lot, it's basically, we tried to, basically what we felt was that these ideas of self-esteem and individuality, they're not focused on enough in Jewish education. So we really wrote a book that was gathering sources so people really understand this is not some new age thing. This is like an ancient idea, and a whole network of ancient ideas that needs to be emphasized in Jewish education, both self-esteem and that people are different and they're meant to be different, and that's the way God wants it. So I'll share the link over here in case any of you guys are interested. Any of you brave souls want to sink your teeth into something a little bit here on this topic.
I think it's worth it, and I think a lot of people could benefit, from it. I don't think it's above our pay grades.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Jack. We will see you next week. We're going to do the breakout rooms right now. So here we go.
Okay, thank you all, guys. All the best.
Hey, great.
All right, let's stop this recording. We don't need to record this.
No, this is you had to be here to see this. This is
Yeah.